You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Hey everyone, this is Clark from 5 Card Guys, one of the hosts of the Cards to the Moon podcast. You might be wondering why I abruptly interrupted the start of this show. Well, unfortunately, we had an audio issue that we caught late in the editing process, and it was just too late to re-record for our regular Tuesday episode release. But in light of the big news being reported this week that Fanatics had reached an agreement to acquire Topps, we wanted to air one segment of the show recorded last week about our 2022 hobby predictions, even with the bad audio. And you guessed it, it was about our thoughts on Topps being bought out by Fanatics. I guess you could say we got one prediction right already. So, before we play the audio excerpt, two things. One, for anyone who's interested in hearing about our other hobby predictions this year, like the impact of NFTs in the hobby, or whether buying retail is going to be just as crazy, we'll transcribe our episode that we wanted to air and post it up on 5cardguys.com. We'll give you a heads up on our social media when it's up later this week. And two, we'll have another mini episode this Thursday, just following up on the huge Fanatics news and what we think is going to happen next. Alright, without further ado, enjoy this mini episode recorded last week about us trying to predict the future, which is apparently already here. 2022. Let's go. Number 4. I saw this in a Forbes article this week, and the writer brought up an interesting question. Will Fanatics pick up or acquire Topps before 2022 ends? Because as we know, Topps loses its MLBPA, which is the Players Union, license at the end of this year. Which means I believe in 2023 they won't be able to use the name, image, likeness of current rostered players or the 40-man roster. They can still push out their products that focus primarily on prospects or retired players, but I wonder what the market would be for that. So essentially, another way of asking this question is, do you think Topps entertains the thought of being bought out by Fanatics this year, knowing that their MLBPA license ends?
If I'm Fanatics, I'm buying Topps. If I'm Topps, I'm selling to Fanatics.
Yes.
End of story.
Yeah.
Like, to me, it makes much sense. Only thing is, I could also see Topps pivoting products to gain more value to their brand.
Right.
Whether it's outside of the baseball, so that the transaction, the inevitable transaction happens, they could cover up for losses and stuff like the MLBPA agreement and stuff like that. I think it's a perfect marriage, like I said.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't really have much more to say to that because I think that's the perfect way to say it. Yeah. I think it's inevitable. It should happen. We'll see what happens. Maybe, Topps has been around for a long time, so they might get really stubborn and prideful not to just let the company go for pennies on the dollar, right? So we'll see if something, emotion gets in the way, and none of we sit here, none of us really know how the business, this is a gigantic business transaction that we're talking about. So there's probably a lot of moving pieces that we're very ignorant to. So who knows what needs to happen for this to actually get done. But in theory, it should happen. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think I wouldn't be surprised if it happens in 2022.
Right.
But kind of related to what you're saying, I don't know, whoever's in charge of Topps, are they still pissed off that Fanatics pulled off their deal this past year? And they're like, no, this is like, rubbing salt into our wounds. And then they become stubborn about it. And then they eventually sell at a much lesser value in the future. But yeah, the question is probably when, not if this happens. But interesting question. We'll see what happens. Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5cardguys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards, or John at TradeU at Recess. You can also check us out at 5cardguys.com. Thanks again, and hope to connect soon.